WBNE.
Hello and welcome to episode 144, all about the Silmarillion, Chapter 4 of Thangol and Melian, and Chapter 5 of Eldamar and the Princes of the Eldalie, being the 144th part of That's What I'm Tolkien About. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. I've been experiencing the world of J.R.R. Tolkien for the first time, and right now I am reading the Silmarillion, so you don't have to. Today, I am continuing the trend of bringing on wonderful Tolkien talkers. What a terrible word I just said, Tolkien talkers. Today, joining us is WizardWayKris. Welcome.
Hello everybody on the interwebs. My name is Kris. I am your resident elf boy on TikTok.
Yes, and I have invited Kris on to geek out about elves because boy howdy, do we have a lot of them to discuss today.
Yes. We're still pretty early in the Silmarillion, but this is the chapter where you get a huge info dump of elvish names.
So many.
Many names. I am here to help. I know an obscene amount of background on all of these elves, so I will help wherever I can.
But before we dive into all of that, why don't you tell me and the listeners how your journey and experience with Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, how did that begin?
I'll try and condense it. I hadn't heard of Tolkien until the movies came out. I was in high school, I was an angsty teenager, and I was dragged to the movies with my family. Didn't want to go. Saw the first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, absolutely got obsessed. Immediately changed my life. So that became the escape of choice for me during high school. I learned Elvish in 2004-ish. The woman who made the online language lessons that I took ended up later on becoming my life partner. So
that's so
internet
fun
romance
and cool.
Somehow.
And
it
amazingly
just happened.
Like geeky and wonderful. That's fantastic.
It's the best, and I'm going to break everyone's hearts. So I had her for 12 years. And Sandra passed away September 30th of 2019. She went in her sleep. No one knows why. In her memory, I decided to relearn Elvish and update my knowledge because a lot of new information has come out about Elvish since 2004. So that's what I have been doing, and that's sort of the direction that my TikTok went, is just translating random shit into Elvish for people. And geeks pay my bills now. It's great.
Well, that's really wonderful that you have found a way to honor her still, and that this is something that I'm sure, that's what just amazes me so much about Tolkien, is the way that this man was born in the 1800s.
Right.
And something that he created and things that he's done have found ways to interweave into people's lives in such important ways. And that's so wonderful that you can remember her through Elvish language, right. And re-diving into it and connecting with more people to talk about it.
Oh yeah. The fandom has really played an integral role in my development, from high school onward, because I was constantly involved in the fan fiction scene and sort of in the background of the language community, which is still mostly on forums, which is why I'm attempting to create Sindarin language lessons that are audio-visual. I have the permission of the linguist Fiona Jallings, who literally wrote the book, A Fan's Guide to Neo-Sindarin. I have permission to adapt her book into AV lessons so people can actually hear me speak Elvish and learn how to speak it, I think, more immersively. It's going to be a huge project, but I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, that's really cool and really exciting. And thank you for taking some time in the midst of that to talk about the old Silm,
Absolutely.
The Silmarillion.
My pleasure. I love this book. It's dry as heck, but I love this book.
Oh boy, yeah, boy is it. Well, listeners, today we are actually, I said, and when I messaged Kris, I said this too, that I wasn't going to combine any chapters because even short chapters have a whole lot of content in them. And I don't want to rush through anything. But at the same time, chapter 4 is 2 pages.
It's very short.
A page and a half. And chapter 5 is a lot more exciting. So with a lot more characters being introduced. And so I felt like chapter 4 could easily be combined. And that being said, when I was looking ahead at some of the other chapter lengths, and there are some in the middle that are like 20 pages long.
Yes, 20 to 30. Once you get to those interior, like self-contained stories within the Silmarillion, things like Beren and Luthien, the Children of Húrin, the Fall of Gondolin, all 3 of those were detailed enough to warrant their own separate books later on.
Oh, geez. Yeah. So bearing that in mind, I'm sure there are going to be chapters ahead that are 2-parters. So we won't be rushing into any of this. Chapter 4 is of Thingol and Melian. Are those correct pronunciations?
Correct. You even did Melian right. I've been mispronouncing Melian's name for years. I keep wanting to say Melian, and that's incorrect. It's Melian.
Melian.
Yeah, Melian
sounds very much like a modern girl's name.
Like Melly or Mel, yeah.
Yeah, whereas Melian. Wait, now Melian.
Yeah, her Quenya name is Meliana. So that's even closer to something that would be more recognizable modern day.
Yeah. Long story short, in this one, Elwë really said, bros before hoes? Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. Not at all. What bros?
Yeah. So,
see pretty girl in woods.
Elwë is one of the elves who was chosen as an ambassador or representative to go check out Valinor, and then he came back with, are they all brothers, Ingwe and Finwë?
They're friends.
Or friends,
yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
they all just have the same name. Great.
Like, if you read other texts by Tolkien, like The Nature of Middle-earth, which came out last year, these are more, I don't want to say recent notes because Tolkien's been dead since the 70s. Yes. But every so often new material gets put out by the Tolkien estate. And in this case, we learned that Finwë, Elwë, Olwë, and Ingwe, which are like most of the names that you got at the very, very beginning of the Silmarillion as like some of the eldest elves, they are actually like the 25th or 26th generation of elves. So that's still really early when you think about it. But they're the eldest named elves. So they're very old.
Okay, because I knew that the elves had been on Arda for a while before the Valar like even really knew that they were there, and Orme, discovered them and all. I didn't know it was that long. So cool.
Years cool. Kind of uncounted. At this point we aren't really counting time in Middle-earth because there's no sun and moon. There's no real way to note the passage of time other than just generations.
Yeah. So yes, a reminder for everyone, Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë were those 3 ambassadors. Olwë is, I believe, Elwë's brother?
Yes.
Yeah, they actually are brothers. And Elwë is leader of the Teleri, the group of elves that eventually do make it to Valinor, as we'll see in the next chapter. But they kind of take their time. They're a little more hesitant, and they kind of do things their own way. Whereas the Vanyar go there immediately, no questions asked, essentially. And the Noldor are a little more, they're slower behind the Vanyar, but they also get there.
Yes, the Teleri are known as the Singers. And this is one group of the elves that then has subgroups, and we sort of get into that starting in this chapter, because this is where one of the major splits of the Teleri happens.
So is it, sorry, I noticed that you're saying Teleri. Is that the pronunciation? Cool. I've been saying Teleri the whole time. Teleri. So, there's that reminder for you all. First, we are introduced to Melian, who is one of the Maya, the lesser kind of demigod to the Valar, the Maiar, and she lives in the gardens of Lorien, and she is comparable to Yavanna, essentially. None more beautiful, nor wise, nor more skilled in song of enchantment. She is kind of the best. And she fills the silence of Middle Earth with her voice and the voice of her birds.
Yes, the nightingales. She's magic forest pixie. Like she's your hot pixie girl.
Yeah, like the ultimate manic pixie dream girl.
Manic pixie dream girl. Exactly. I couldn't think of the exact term. That is it.
I believe in my notes, I described her as a hot wood nymph.
Well, manic pixie dream girl actually works really well because Lorien is the realm of dreams in Valinor.
Perfect.
So, like, that's
so
absolutely apt.
Yeah, okay.
Melian was the former servant of Este and Vana, which are two of the different Valar. So that's like the tier that's higher up. They would be like the archangels versus the normal angels. So if Melian is an angel, she served the archangels, Este and Vana. And, you know, I hate putting it in Christianity terms, but it resonates with enough people that it gives you a visual. It's a point of reference.
Yeah, it's so comparable to the Bible. It's just not even funny. Like
Tolkien, your Catholic showing.
I know, really. Like whether he, you know, wanted to admit it or not, or denied it later or accepted it later, you know, like it's here. It's there.
He oscillated, but he knew that in order to write what he wanted to be a believable mythology for the English. That was the original intent, and then later he laughed it off as like, wow, that was hubris. I could never. But with that intent originally, he knew that he needed to put things in a context with a point of reference or a system of organization that would make sense to most English people. So that's why he keeps,
Bible it is.
He keeps some of the structure of like the divine beings.
Yeah. So one day, Elwë is walking around in the woods as they're all journeying towards Valinor, and he hears the voice of Melian, and an enchantment falls on him, and he forgot then utterly all his people and all the purposes of his mind. So
Bro literally lost his mind.
Yes.
He heard some girl sing and went absolutely dumbstruck.
Yeah. Finds her, took her hand, and straight away a spell was laid on him.
And they stand there literally for ages. They just stand there hand in hand. Who needs to breathe? Who needs to eat? Not them, apparently.
Because they're in love.
They're in love. And this is sort of finding hot women in the woods is kind of an ongoing theme for Tolkien. This is not the last time this is going to happen. It happens several times. So just take this as a precursor. Like, it's going to happen a few more times.
Yeah. So Olwe, his brother, is like, well,
where'd my
guess
brother go?
I'm king now.
Like, are you sure you can't find him? You looked everywhere? And they're like, yeah, bro, like, cannot find him. And we're calling out for him. He's not answering because Elwë's just over here like,
yeah.
Just completely entranced.
Like cartoon heart eyes.
Heart eyes, the whole thing. Just completely dumbstruck, like I said. And so, you know, always like, well, so, I mean, we're still leaving, right? And some of the elves are like, yeah, we kind of still want to go to Valinor. That was kind of the whole point. And others are like, but he's our king.
And you know what?
Elwë's our king.
Props to Olwe, because he has not seen, like, the whole point of these three ambassadors is that they have seen the light of Valinor or whatever it is. They have beheld the light, and that's what motivated them and, you know, convince them to convince everyone else that this is like this is a good idea. Olwe was not one of those three that saw it. So he's just taken up the helm here and is like, let's go.
Well,
so props to Olwe.
Yeah, serious props to Olwe, because not only is he dealing with the grief of losing his brother, because Elwë is nowhere to be found. And we should emphasize,
literally losing his brother.
Like, not to death, but just losing him. He's lost. No one can find him. So not only dealing with the should I stay or should I go, because what if he's just out there and we haven't found him yet? But they look for years and nothing happens. So he then has to grapple with, well, what would my brother have wanted me to do if I took over? Like, if he had actually died, what would Elwë have wanted? And Elwë wanted them to go to Valinor. So he's thinking, this is what my brother would have wanted me to do. Mm-hmm. Of course, that changes when Elwë comes out of his trance. But some of the elves go with Olwe, and they end up traveling over to Valinor. And then other elves are unwilling to forsake Elwë, and they stay and keep looking for him. And that's why we end up with a huge amount of what are then called the Sindar elves, the Grey elves, who stay in Beleriand looking for Elwë. And eventually they do find him.
Yes, it says that Elwë came never again across the sea to Valinor so long as he lived. So it's funny that Olwe would be like, what would my brother would want us to go to Valinor. And then Elwë is like, what?
He's like, no, I forgot. I'm cool being king here.
I'm good here. So yes, he and Melian kind of become king and queen of their realm.
The original power couple. They are the power couple of Beleriand. Like, I will stand by that statement. They are the power couple of Beleriand.
Yeah, and his people were all the Eldar of Beleriand. The Sindar, they were named the Grey Elves, the Elves of the Twilight. Melian lends some of her power to, he is now called Thingol.
Yes, I can help with some of his names. The name Elwë it's a Quenya name, and it just means Starman. You see El used everywhere, just E-L. E-L means star. You see that with Elrond, Elros, Elrohir, Eladon. Mm-hmm. All of these El names, they all have that same root of El, which means star. So Elwë is just El plus Way. Way is just a masculine name ending. Which is why you have Olwe, Elwë, Finwë, Ingwe.
So does that mean Manwë is man?
Manwë is slightly different. I do have his name background too. Let me bring it up really quickly.
He's just man.
Man. He's the blessed one.
Ugh,
Manwë, Man means blessed, and Way is like, it's just a male name, so one or man. So yeah, the blessed man.
So yeah, and then they grow kind of their kingdom and their realm together. And of the love of Thingol and Melian, there came into the world the fairest of all the children of Iluvatar that was or ever shall be.
More foreshadowing. Because it's going to be a while before you get to Beren and Lúthien's story. But this is the only documented case in Tolkien's Legendarium of a Maya having a child with an elf. It's the only time it ever happens. So because of that, we're dealing with half divine, half elf. And that's what their daughter ends up being. And so she is the fairest of them all. It's very Snow White. Yeah.
Yeah, the children are going to be smoking hot. Like,
yeah.
So that's the end of chapter 4. Again, very short. Chapter 5 is
it's a hot
just
mess.
So many things.
It is a huge info dump of names, because that's of Eldamar and the princes of the Eldalie.
Eldalie. Okay.
Yeah. All of the vowels are separate. The vowels are separate. So when Tolkien has a Quenya word and it ends with an E that has the double dot on top, the umlaut on top, it's just a reminder for you to speak that vowel separately from the other vowels.
Okay.
There are no silent end E's. Every
I was
E
trying to figure out how that worked with the IE. Because IE is E. But yeah, with the umlaut. Okay. With the A.
Yeah.
So the Vanyar and the Noldor, the first two groups of the elves, still making their way over to Valinor. They reach kind of the edge of Beleriand. Their land, is my correct there? Okay.
Yes.
And they have reached a huge ocean. Because remember, Melkor's f***ed everything up. He has changed the shape of the world, and he's just
like a petulant child. He kicked down the lamps. He he ruins everything that he possibly can because he wants the chance to create basically by himself. He wanted the chance to create things, and that being denied him. He's like, fine. I'm going to corrupt everything that my fellows are going to try and create.
They have this huge ocean. To the north is a huge ice mass that they could technically cross, but that would be really dangerous.
Think of it like the Bering Strait that connects Alaska and Russia.
Yeah, so Orome, who has been leading them, is like, now we'll stay here. And Olmo comes up, the sea god, our Poseidon, essentially. And he brings with him a whole island.
Like you do.
In the form of, it's a boat.
Yeah, the land boat. It's literally a big island, and they crowd all the elves onto that island. And since he's the sea god, he can just push the island to the other side of the sea.
I was laughing because there's a classic episode of SpongeBob, and where the town is being terrorized. I think it's the worm episode, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And Patrick is like, let's just take the town and push it over here. And so I was just imagining just Olmo just pushing
Simple
an entire
solution.
Town. All the elves, the Vanyar and the Noldor, I should say, get on this island. It mentions that a part of the island breaks off and settles in the Bay of
Balar.
Something. It settles closer to the shore of Beleriand.
Yes.
And that is the Isle of Balar, to which afterwards Ose often came.
The interesting thing is that Ose is Balar. They don't really explain that here, but that's just another name for Ose. So this is the tempestuous lesser god of the ocean. He's the one who causes sea storms.
Right, yeah.
But he's enamored with the coasts. So the coast of Beleriand coming from the word Balar. The Bay of Balar, the Isle of Balar. It's all named for him. How you like that? How you like that?
That makes me mad.
I'm sorry.
What happened. I'm just like, can we just not have oh yeah, that's the Green Hill. It's named the Green Hill.
That is literally what Tolkien does all the time. His names are really, really simplistic. And they tend to just describe the thing that he's naming. But we don't know that because we don't know Elvish, most of us, right? So it's all of these complicated names, and then when you learn what the name actually means, it makes you feel stupid.
Yeah, that's exactly
of course.
it. Yeah.
Círdan the shipwright. Círdan means shipwright. He's just named shipwright.
So
you're welcome.
Oh my gosh.
God, Tolkien.
So that is how the Vanyar and the Noldor make it to Valinor.
Yes.
The Teleri, however, Teleri. The Teleri remain behind in Middle-earth. They didn't hear that this was happening. They missed the memo until it was too late. They missed the boat.
They literally missed the island boat. Yeah.
And there were several who, like we mentioned before, stayed behind to look for Elwë, and they were not willing to leave at all.
Yeah, they weren't. At first, the entire host of them was not willing to leave without Elwë, so they all stayed temporarily to look for him. But then, the Vanyar and Noldor are suddenly gone. They're like, wait, are we not going now? Did we miss our opportunity? And that's when you have that schism between those who follow Olwë across the sea eventually and those who decide to stay permanently to look for Elwë.
Yeah. The ones that go with Olwe to continue their journey, they hang out on the coasts by the sea. I guess maybe thinking like, well, maybe the boat will come, the island boat will come back.
Question mark?
And they befriend Ose and Weenen. Yeah, they just have a good time hanging out there. And a reminder that these are the elves they're the sea elves. They really love the water. So they're like, this is great. We're friends with these like sea demigods. There's music and, it's all cool. We love this. This is fun.
The defining attributes of the Teleri, because Teleri means the singers. They're called the singers. So they're a very musical folk. But this sect of them is called the Falathrim. The Falathrim or Falmari, which those terms might pop up every so often. The people of the Falas being the coast. That's what Falas means.
I was wondering what that meant.
Yeah, Falas is the coast. So if you end up with the Falathrim, that is the people of the coast, or the Falmari, the people of the coast. So these are the coastline elves, the sea elves that are along the coastline. And some of them end up staying. Círdan is their lord. And they sort of stay in these couple of different dwellings called Brythumbar and Eglarest. But they are some of the ones that end up staying because they like Ose. They're like, we kind of have it pretty cushy here being friends with the ocean gods. And so they decide, well, we're really happy here. We love the ocean. Do we even need to go to Valinor? And a lot of them think, no, we're happy here.
Stay behind, and they become the first mariners of Middle-earth and the first ship makers.
Yes.
So again, if you're keeping track, the main three groups of elves so far, the Vanyar, the Noldor, the Teleri. Within the Teleri, there are the Falathrim, who are the ones that stay behind here. And then in just a second, we'll meet another group that we've already kind of mentioned a bit. But of the Teleri they're like, well, wait a minute. We still do really want to see Valinor. So Olmo comes back. Does it mention how? It just says, besought him to bring them to Aman if they would come. Does he I'm just imagining like a giant wave. And they're all just surfing on top
these
of the
elves.
wave.
Yeah, no, that's probably as close to accurate as we're gonna get visually.
Because I don't think it mentions specifically how but Olmo is involved and he gets them.
He could, we don't know for sure, but he could have, lifted up a land bridge for them to cross from Beleriand onto this island.
Yeah, okay,
cool. The remaining Isle of Balar, yeah.
If you've thought, okay, finally, this group of elves who were known to tarry, great, they finally made it to Valinor. Hold that thought. We'll come back to it in a second.
The tarrying Teleri.
Then the part of the Teleri who stayed behind and did not go to the coast with the rest of the Teleri were the Eglath, the Forsaken
people, yes.
And these are the ones who stayed behind. I feel so bad for them. They really were like, we're going to stay here and look for Elwë.
Don't feel bad for them. Like, they miss their friends.
And then
they chose to stay.
Yeah, but they didn't know that Elwë was like under this spell, and they didn't, they probably thought they were doing the right thing. Like, this is our lord. We're meant to follow him. We're meant to really look for him. I
have very little pity. That's just because the Sindar have it pretty good. At this point. Because Beleriand isn't nearly as besieged by the dark forces of Morgoth at this point. So there are these beautiful forests, and you have Osiriand, which we'll get introduced to later, but that's like the land of 7 rivers. And so you have these lush, beautiful green places. And the elves that do choose to stay behind end up settling these places. And when they find Elwë and find with him Melian, Melian has magic, as only a divine being can in Tolkien's world, and she creates what's called the Girdle of Melian, and it encapsulates a couple of the different forests and keeps them absolutely safe from harm for almost the entirety of the First Age and the time that comes prior to that. So, like, they've got it pretty cushy, and they get Luthien Tenuviel out of it when they have their daughter, Luthien, who's the most beautiful thing ever.
Sure.
So, I mean, you know.
However, it says, they dwelt in the woods and the hills of Beleriand rather than by the sea, which filled them with sorrow. But the desire of Ammon was ever in their hearts.
Yeah.
So, sure, eventually their, grandchildren probably had it good.
there's still, it's very much like Legolas hearing the cry of the gulls and then feeling that yearning of going over to Valinor, even though he's never been there. It's the same sort of feel. The same sort of feel that because they know that there's this blessed realm, this is where the gods live. We were told stories from Elwë himself being like, you gotta see this place. And then they never get to see it. So yeah, okay, it's a little sad. I'll give it to you.
And then there's Elwë, I would say, like, maybe beside Melkor, like, maybe our more problematic character who
and we're only scratching the surface.
Granted, like, when you're talking about, like, this enchanting voice of Maya, like, how much of this was in Elwë's control and how much of it was him literally, like, under a spell.
That's fair.
But he eventually comes out of it. He comes out of this trance and kind of looks around and was like, wait a minute, this isn't Valinor. And he still desires greatly to see the light of the trees. But instead it says, in the face of Melian, he beheld the light of Ammon as in an unclouded mirror. And in that light, he was content.
He's like, I've got my little piece of heaven right here. Yeah.
And he's like, wow, my wife is hot.
She's so hot.
Okay, I'm good now. And then lives the rest of his life.
I saw Valinor. This is the best part. Like, you'll just have to trust me.
Yeah. That's what's happened in Beleriand. And then now we're shifting, looking over across the sea toward Valinor. So remember how Ose had befriended the Teleri. And also remember how Ose kind of has a bit of a temper.
Yeah.
He follows them, and I was like, uh-oh, that's not good. And I thought something worse would happen. I thought he was going to, like, rage a huge storm or something.
It's not too bad. He actually really loves these elves. Like, and
yes, he loves them.
He established a relationship with this sect of the elven population. He doesn't really want to see them go.
Yeah. So Olmo also understands, it says understands the heart of the Teleri, as Ose does. Olmo actually was one of the Valar who, in the council a couple chapters ago, they were debating, like, do we bring the elves here where they're going to be safer? Do we let them do their own thing down there, or I guess over there? Olmo was one of the ones that thought that they should remain in Middle-earth. And so they eventually come to an agreement and they stop this island, or create an island kind of off the coast of Valinor, and it is Tol Eressëa.
Correct.
The Lonely Isle, which begs the question, are the Lonely Island Tolkien fans? The band. Which might not be wrong, because I'm a big Brooklyn Nine-Nine fan. I don't know how much Andy Samberg had in the, like, how much influence Andy Samberg had in the writer's room, but it was really funny to be watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine after I started reading Lord of the Rings and stuff, and there are a lot of, like, random Lord of the Rings and Tolkien references that the characters say.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Like, clearly someone in the writer's room.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, someone in the Brooklyn Nine-Nine writer's room was a Lord of the Rings fan. So maybe it was Andy Samberg all along. Anyway, so that's just all I can think of.
So what you're saying is, when the Teleri are taking this island, to just off the coast of Valinor, they're all singing, "I'm on a boat."
Yes. Yes.
Take a good hard look at this
mother boat.
I'm on a boat.
I'm on a boat and it's going fast, and oh my god.
I mean, it's accurate though.
Great song.
That
was definitely, that song came out where like I was at an age where I knew curse words and like I was saying them with my friends. There
was still some novelty to it, like how
terrified
brash it was.
Of like adults hearing me say those words, you know?
Same.
Yeah, so anyway, so the Teleri have still not made it to Valinor officially. They are Valinor adjacent.
Adjacent, yes.
They're like almost there, but they're still on their own island doing their own thing because they still want to, I guess, hang out with Olmo. They want to hang out with Ose. And because they are the sea elves, this group in particular. And so they hang out there, and this is where it says this is what caused the sundering of their speech from that of the Vanyar and the Noldor. So they start developing differentiations in their language because they are living in their own island.
Yes. We don't get too many examples of proper, like, Telerin Elvish, but it is, you know, one of those things that because of the space between them, much like the Sindar develop Sindarin, it becomes a completely different language of the elves compared to Quenya, which is spoken by the Noldor and the Vanyar in Valinor. So these languages evolve separately. And the same thing for the Telerin Elvish. So yeah, we have basically 3 different kinds of Elvish now.
I saw recently, it was probably on TikTok, the explanation that like this American Southern accent comes from like the original like British accent, and the way that a British accent slowed down, I think is the way that they explained it, sounds similar to a Southern accent, an American Southern accent. And so this person was explaining that and how like slowly over time, that's how like people who
it's how dialects form,
whatever.
Right? It's how dialects form.
So like,
which is the same spoken or written language, but it sounds different.
Anyway, the Vanyar and the Noldor, they are on Valinor. They're chilling, having a good time. However, they still want to see the stars because that is where they were born. They came of the stars. That was the first thing they saw and all that jazz. The Valar create a gap in the great walls of the Pelori, and in a valley they raise up a hill named Tuna. Just named Tuna.
Just to help people, because everyone's like, tuna, like the fish. It's hard to not think that when you see it on the page, but originally it was just Tun. It was Tun, and I don't know why he added the A on the end and went with it, but Tuna.
That's what the man did.
It started as TU with a caret or circumflex accent, and then N, so it was just Tun. And then he added the A and it became Tuna.
For whatever, yeah. On this hill, they built their own city, Tirion.
Yeah,
Tirion. Okay, great. So they make their own city on this hill that is kind of near or in front of this gap in the wall so that they can still see the stars. They are given, Yavanna gives them kind of a copy, but a lesser copy of one of them fancy trees that we talked about earlier. And this one is named Galathilion.
That's correct. Yeah.
I had to read all the syllables. And
yeah, Galathilion. And that is basically like a brother tree to Telperion. Telperion is the elder of the 2 trees of Valinor. It's the silver tree. Which, because the silver tree is kind of like as close as you're going to get to the starlight in Valinor, it tended to be more treasured by the elves. The elves, the ones who go to Valinor, are called the Eldar. The ones who undertake this journey, even if they don't make it, because the Sindar are still considered the Eldar. The Eldar elves, their name itself means star people. because again, remember? Eladon, Elrond, Elway, everything. It all has to do with the stars. So whenever you have anything that resembles the stars, it tends to be like the elves put their hands on it and say mine. So they see the 2 trees and they're like, ooh, we like the silver one. Can we have one of those pretty trees? And Yavanna's like, sure.
Sure, here you go.
It's not
as good as the original.
It's not as good as the original, but consider it like
a
brother tree. This is a blood brother tree.
So we have to mention that the Vanyar are I don't like them because they're the snooty oldest child, they can do no wrong. And they are
the
Manwë's and Varda's favorite.
They are.
Remember, they are the fair elves. They're fancy pantsy. And spoiler alert, eventually they think they're too good for Tyrion and they just go up to where are the Valar? What's the name of that?
Manwë and Varda live on a very tall peak called Taniquetil. And
that's it. That's what
Taniquetil is like the big mountain. I actually have a painting of it in my room because my whole room is supposed to be Manwë and Varda themed. Because I'm a geek. And
oh, really? I couldn't tell.
If you couldn't tell. So, Taniquetil is a very, very tall mountain, and Manwë and Varda sort of live at the top of it. So, in the Vanyar's defense, I wouldn't want to climb that mountain and go across a field to get back and forth from Tyrion up to Taniquetil all the time.
It makes sense. Like, move to where you're constantly commuting to. I get that.
Right.
The Noldor were much beloved of Aule, and it says, great became their knowledge and skill that eventually they surpassed their teachers and they learn a lot of speech and I guess like linguistics, and they come to start, I guess, mining and they discover tons of, it just says earth gems.
Yeah, earth gems.
And they
find earth gems, they find ore, they find all of the things that the earth has to offer.
And they also develop tools for cutting and shaping them and carving them. And it says they hoarded them not, but gave them freely. My question is, this sounds an awful lot like dwarves?
Yes. Okay, so...
Because that would be natural because Aule is the one who created dwarves.
Yes.
So
Aule's name itself means inventor. He is the inventor god. So that's why it's not just mining. It's the invention of everything. It's tools. It's language and communication. It's the pursuit of knowledge and utilizing that knowledge in a way that can be shared. That's what Aule is all about. But everyone that ever went wrong and became evil also came from Aule. So there's kind of there's a dark side to the pursuit of knowledge and what knowledge and how knowledge is converted into power and how power corrupts. So we do get a certain, it's like they're too alike to get along when it comes to the Noldor and the dwarves, or the Naugrim. They are in some ways cut from the same cloth because, like you said, they're both beloved by Aule. Aule wanted to teach them everything. The dwarves just develop differently later on. But there's a lot of similarity there where the elves get obsessed with mining things, with creating gems. That's how we get the Silmarils later on. And it is that struggle that becomes that struggle with power and creation that then carries over back into Beleriand, and why we see so much struggle between the Noldor and the dwarves. Because they're too alike. It's like, a father.
That makes sense.
It's like a father and son that are so alike that they don't get along because they butt heads. It's the same kind of concept. The elves just did it first.
Yeah. Should mention, it also says here that the Noldor afterwards came back to Middle-earth, and this tale tells mostly of their deeds.
Yes.
So the Noldor we will hear a lot about in the coming future.
Yeah.
And given my very little knowledge, I know the name of the book is the Silmarillion. I know there are gems named the Silmarils. I know that the Noldor mine for gems and create things out of them. So like I see, the pieces being laid down here,
yes,
I guess.
This is all sort of setting the stage. It's introducing you to all of the pieces so that you can then follow the chess game to follow.
Yeah. Speaking of pieces, we're about to get a whole lot more. So,
segue accepted.
We have Finwë, who is the ambassador, the king of the Noldor, who led them here. His 3 sons were Feanor, Fingolfin.
Correct.
That sounds wrong. And Finarfin. Those sound wrong. Like those are awful.
No, you even got the emphasis right, because the emphasis goes on the second to last syllable. So it's Fingolfin, not Fingolfin. It's Fingolfin and Finarfin.
Fingolfin and Finarfin.
Golfin Narf.
And possibly worth mentioning, Feanor has a different mother than the other 2.
This is essential information later on. This is a big deal.
Just knowing like how, I don't know, just like the way that a lot of tropes play out in a lot of other fantasy and pieces of media. There's like one child who has a different parent than the rest of them, they're treated differently in some way, whether that's better or worse. But like, that's very
terrible.
common.
What's really terrible here is we know who the main character is based on who's losing their parents. Tolkien used that trope too, like the orphan kid kind of thing. The orphan kid that ends up being the main character.
I wasn't even thinking about it in that way. I was just like, they got divorced and he married another woman and had the other 2 sons.
Yeah, Finwë.
I wasn't thinking about the fact that like
Finwë's a great guy, but he's not the main character. He has his first wife. Her name is Miriel. Which means jewel daughter, so that's kind of nice. Miriel is his first wife, and with her, they have Feanaro, or Feanor. Feanaro being his mother name. And I'm going to have to explain a little something about names, because every elf has 2 to 5 names.
Oh.
So things are going to get really messy,
annoying.
And so I'm going to explain the mechanics of why that is really quickly. So there's the father name. The father name is given to an elf pretty close to their birth, typically given by the father to the child, and that is like their formal name. Then they're given usually a few years later, once the parents have gotten to know the kid a little bit, they are given a mother name. The mother name is typically given by the mother, and it's given with a certain prophetic foresight. So it typically says something about the character or the fate of that person. So that'll typically be a lot more telling of a name if you know the elvish roots of whatever the character's name is. And then, after those 2 names, an elf can take their own name. They can choose their own name, their chosen name. Not all of them do, but some of them do. So then you end up with a chosen name, and then epices. Epices are after names, and those are given based on deeds that they do or defining attributes, but it's typically given to them by the people that they govern or what have you. The people that know them give them names. In the case of Galadriel is her epice. It was the name given to her by Celeborn, the guy she marries. Celeborn gave her the name Galadriel.
I don't know that I like that.
It's kind of cute, but
that makes me mad that the name that we know her by, and
it's not her actual name. Yeah, it's not her given name.
The name that her husband gave her.
It was considered the most beautiful of her names, and it is really poetic, because that takes it to another level. But it is the name that her husband gave her. Yeah.
Well, makes me mad. I'm glad we won't ever have to deal with her in this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, she doesn't play a part.
I'm glad we never see her. Then Feanor, we have like kind of Feanor is the mightiest in skill of word and of hand. Fingolfin was the strongest, most steadfast, and most valiant. And Finarfin was the fairest and most wise of heart. So that's kind of our little introduction to these 3. Then Feanor has 7 sons.
Yep.
Maedhros,
Father Feanor had many sons.
Maedhros, the Tall.
Maedhros.
The Tall. Maglor, the Mighty Singer. Celegorm, the Fair. Caranthir, the Dark. Curufin, the Crafty. Which sounds like, like a Loki trickster thing, but it's literally craftsman.
Yeah,
like who inherited his father's skill of hand.
Yeah.
And the youngest, Amrod and Amros, were twin brothers. So those are the 7 sons of Feanor.
The 7 sons of Feanor.
The first son of Fenway.
Correct.
Then
this is a welcome to the family Feanor. I actually did a parody of the family Madrigal and changed it to the family Feanor. I just haven't published it yet. But we talk about all 7 of his sons because they're very distinct, and every single one of them has a role to play in the Silmarillion. Like the sons of Feanor are a huge component of what happens in these stories, and they're sprinkled throughout everything. The sons of Feanor are never too far behind when a Silmaril is doing anything. Oh boy. So it's good to
can't wait to see what the tall one does.
Oh, poor Maedhros. Okay.
The Tall.
The Tall. The interesting thing, this is stuff that just, unless you do a ton of research behind the scenes, they don't really tell you this in the Silmarillion. But most of the names that you just gave for the 7 sons of Feanor are Sindarinized versions of their Quenya mother names. So these are, all except one, are based off of their mother names, or their more prophetic names that were given by Nerdanel, their mother. So Maedhros means shapely redhead. He's the hot redhead.
Oh, he's just a tall.
He's the sexy redhead of the story.
I don't know why that makes me like. What are we gonna we'll name you for your singing voice and you for your heart.
It's better.
Hey,
it's better than his. It's better than his father name. His father name is Nelia Finwë, which just means third Finwë, because Finwë. Feanor,
the third, yeah,
Maedhros. So he is the grandson of Finwë, therefore he is the third Finwë. I'm like, well, that's lame. I'm glad he went with the other names, because his other 2 names. His mother name is Maitimo, which means well-shaped one, and his epise, the given name that he gets later on, is Rusendol, which means copper top for his red hair. So Maedhros is sort of a smushing together of those last 2 names. See, the well-shaped one in Coppertop becomes shapely redhead.
Yeah. So then next, the second son of Finwë, Fingolfin, has 2 sons, Fingon and Turgon. And he also has a daughter, Aradhel, the White.
Aradhel. D-H in the.
She grows up to be really tall and beautiful and amazing, and honestly kind of possibly another manic pixie dream girl, because she also hunts and rides and stuff. So she is in all essence of a YA character, of the girl who skateboards but also does it in a dress.
Oh yeah. Feminine but active, right? The perfect combination that men can't resist, and this is unfortunately going to bite her in the ass later on.
So she is later named Arfaniel, the White Lady of the Noldor, for she was pale, though her hair was dark. And she always wears silver and white, so I don't know why that's funny. And then the youngest son, Finarfin, has 4 sons and a daughter. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Finrod, who afterwards was named Felagund, Orodreth, Angrod, and Aegnor.
Close. Angrod and Aegnor.
Angrod?
Like Ang. Like Ang, but Ang.
Ang. Like in the
Avatar.
in the movie adaptation that we pretend doesn't exist.
Yes, M. Night Shyamalan's Ong. It's Angrod.
Angrod.
And then Agnor.
Agnor.
Close enough.
I think it works for me.
These two are inconsequential. You will barely see them.
Great. That's all I care about.
Yeah, you don't need to say these names right. They're not huge characters.
And then another inconsequential person is their sister Galadriel.
Yeah, who cares about her?
And I was like, that one I know. Like, slam book down, finally
a character I recognize.
It's that moment in Ghostbusters where they get the first call for their first ghost, and she hangs up the phone and goes, "We got one."
No, that is what
it felt like.
That's what I think everyone who read The Lord of the Rings first and then tried to tackle the Silmarillion, they're like, oh, finally, there's one name I recognize.
Of those bajillion elf names that we just went through, the ones that stand out to me that I have either heard people on TikTok reference or people with the Lord of the Rings series coming up bring up or mention, I've heard Fëanor, I've heard Finrod, and obviously Galadriel. And I believe the explanation we have for what Galadriel is doing in the Amazon Prime series is that possible spoilers for the Silmarillion. So if you don't want to find out, then I guess fast forward 30 seconds, is that she is, I believe, avenging the death of Finrod, her brother, from some battle, or looking into that or something like that. But Finrod has died, and that's why Galadriel is like out fighting, doing stuff in the series.
Which is plausible, but I feel like they are probably
we'll just have to
they're probably
happens.
going to change the background of Finrod if they do that, which I won't be thrilled about because Finrod is an amazing character.
So of those million names, without saying anything more, I guess,
sure.
Who can you name the ones that we should remember?
The ones you should
going
remember.
Forward.
Definitely Fëanor. There will be all 7 of his sons, but really mostly Maedhros, his eldest. Maedhros the Tall, the sexy redhead. You'll want to keep an eye on Maedhros. Celegorm and Curufin, which are 2 of those middle sons of Fëanor, they tend to be paired together. They tend to get into trouble together. You'll want to keep an eye on Turgon.
Okay.
Not only for what he does, but for his association with other characters. And Finrod, the eldest son of Finarfin.
So delete the rest from my brain.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And deleted. Control A, delete.
All right, cool. So coming back once more to the Teleri.
Yes.
Who are still technically not in Valinor. They're close to it, but not there.
They're on Tol Eressëa, yeah.
Yes. They're on Tol Eressëa. They've been there for a while. They're still having a good time, but they are much like Frodo or Sam. I can't remember who said it. I would not have you be split in two or whatever. They're torn between their love of the water and Ulmo and Osei and everything, and then their desire to be with the rest of their people and also see the light of Valinor, for themselves.
Yes, this sect of the Teleri were very close to the Noldor. They were very close friends. And you look at Finwë and Olwë, Finwë and Elwë. So Finwë and those 2 brothers, they were also really close friends. And so when Elwë doesn't come at all, Finwë's very upset about it. He's really sad that he doesn't get to see his best friend again. So these 2 peoples, they sort of follow suit. If the leaders of the people are friends, typically the people themselves are also friends.
Right, yeah. So Osei, he's upset, he's sad, but he teaches them how to build ships nonetheless, and kind of is like a last gift to them. And they are given swans to draw the ships over to the land. And thus, at last and latest, they came to Aman and the shores of Eldamar. Yay! They made it! Finally! It's about time.
Took them how long? Looking at the watch.
Yeah. So they It just says there they dwelt, so I guess they stayed on the shores.
Yes.
They scatter a lot of the gems and crystals and pearls that the Noldor give them along the beaches, and so everything's really pretty. And they
sparkly.
Find pearls in the sea as well, so they make it look beautiful. And they sail a lot using this new, gift and knowledge that they have. So they just enjoy their time being the mariners.
Yeah, the mariners.
The sea elves.
So we now have two sects of mariners on opposite sides of the Great Sea. So you have
that's a great point.
you have the sea elves that are still on the coast of Beleriand, and you have the sea elves that are now on the coast of Valinor.
Much like the northern and southern water tribes.
Yeah.
Except for this, I guess, would be eastern and western.
Eastern and western.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually a really good comparison because, there are similarities, but then because they are so completely polar opposite sides of the world at that point, they also develop separately. And so you'll see this sort of connection of viewing them as kin, but also recognizing that you have separated.
That they're different. Yeah, exactly. So like we mentioned earlier, the Vanyar eventually leave behind Tyrion and just go live with, Manwë and
Varda up on the mountaintop.
Up there, right? And they became sundered from the Noldor, which sounds very
it sounds a lot more
final,
intense than it actually is. It's just that they moved away. And, again, when you're that high up on the mountain, you're not going to go up and down if you can help it. So while I'm sure trade existed between the Noldor and the Vanyar, they weren't constantly around, each other anymore because the Vanyar moved out of Tyrion and they're like, well, this is our home, so we're not going anywhere. Bye.
Yeah. But it just didn't surprise me that the fair elves, the highest of them and their most favored.
I love that you have a negative connotation with the Vanyar.
I mean, they just seem like the 1%,
snooty uppity elves.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the
Alqualonde, yes.
Alqualonde, is that I guess the village
that's the main dwelling on the seaside. Yeah, that's their
Teleri.
big dwelling.
Make their little village
right on the
shores.
coast.
Okay.
Right on the coast there.
Whatever. Point being, Olwe and Finwë, they're buds, so their people are buds too.
Yep.
And then I'll be honest, I didn't highlight or take notes or anything on this last paragraph, so I remember nothing. It just says, Feanor and his sons abode seldom in one place for long, but traveled far and wide upon the confines of Valinor, going even to the borders of the dark and the cold shores of the outer sea, seeking the unknown.
They really like to explore. Feanor and his sons, as problematic as they end up being, they have a true vivacious nature. Feanor's name means fire spirit. It means spirit fire. So he is literally the fiery guy. He's got a lot of energy. He's got a lot of hunger for knowledge and creativity, and just that is his MO. And he gives that to all of his sons. And you'll see how there's just sort of a special connection between him and his sons, even though Feanor's not a nice guy and he's not a great father. But just there's some sort of inexplicable link between him and his sons where at the very least they respect the heck out of him.
Well, that is the end of that chapter. So much about elves. The whole time I was just
so much.
Okay, great. This is another break off of the elves that form their own group, and these ones are called the blah blah blah, and these ones have their own and I'm like,
this is when people people typically, if they're a visual learner like I tend to be, I'm a visual kinesthetic person. So if I sit down and take the time to write out a chart, a lineage chart, if I take the time to write it down and then I color code it or something, so the Feanorians are red and Fingolfin is blue and Finarfin is green and all of their kids are color-coded. If I do that, it helps me remember who the heck these people are.
Yeah, I needed a family tree.
This is when people start to take notes like that, because you just got dumped, like 24 names?
I desperately need to look up a more complete map, because the map that's in the back of my book only shows like the ocean and then Beleriand. And that's and like half of the so it doesn't show me where, like, when it was talking about the island that the Teleri are on in relation to Valinor.
You had it.
God. And then, like where the hill is that the Noldor are on, and Tyrion and in relation to Tuna. I'm like, I need all of that included in the map too. So like, yeah, it's definitely getting like, it's just so much.
Luckily,
to keep track
you can Google it. There are a couple different versions.
Oh yeah,
of it.
It's just a matter of I need to do that. Well, that will bring us to the end of the episode. Kris, thank you so much for coming on and diving into the many elves that we met today. Where can people find you on the internet?
My handle everywhere is the same. I'm on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. I primarily stream on YouTube, and it's all WizardWayKris. So WizardWayKris with a K. And I also have a website, which is elfboy.com, elf-boi.com, where I update people about the language lessons that I'm working on, the video language lessons. And I just have a lot of geeky stuff over there. That's where you can buy my merch. I do all sorts of Elvish merch, and that is also where you can contact me if you want a custom Elvish translation done, because I do those too.
I believe you've done a few for Don Marshall, right?
I did his t-shirts.
You did Yeet Isildur?
I did not. Yeet Isildur is not the one that I did. That predates my relationship with Don, but I did the Get the Healing Poke, the Get Vaccinated shirts. I also did the You're All Welcome Here, because people are being a-holes about, being gatekeeping about who can be fans and who can't. Don't do that. Yeah. But yeah, I did those shirts. I did the Mummy, in Elvish.
That's the one I was thinking about.
Mommy and
That's
Daddy,
what I was
sorry.
Thinking about when I said
I did that too.
Yeah.
And recently, I actually got introduced to Cammy Cat. For anyone who is a D&D fan, she does original songs for her D&D campaigns. She has about 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. She's kind of a big deal. She hired me to translate an entire song into Elvish, and that's coming out in the next week. So if anyone listens to the podcast, hopefully it'll be out by the time you hear this. So check out Cammy Cat on YouTube.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WBNE. If you want to learn more about the network, go to WBNE.org, where you will find all of our shows like Perspective Z. The cover art is by Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at Vaishon Designs. You can get merch for That's What I'm Talking About by going to tpublic.com/user/TolkienAboutPod. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at TolkienAboutPod. You can follow me on Twitter at MCWhatsUp and Instagram at MCTurndownForWhat. You can support the podcast by becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod to explore the different tiers and perks that are available, which I did just recently update to try and refresh and be able to better show my appreciation for my wonderful patrons, such as Alan. Alan, thank you so much for continuing to support the podcast and sending me funny memes when you find them. I very much appreciate it. Thank you again for coming on. All of that being said, do you have any parting words for the audience?
Don't let all of the names overwhelm you. Like, if you forget all of the names that we just covered in Chapter 5, it is okay, because they will be restated a bunch of times. But you can do this. I believe in you. It is not an easy book to cover, but that's why you have us to help you along the way.
And that's what I'm talking about.